Amateur Traveler, episode 845. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about beaches and beach bars, hikes and petroglyphs, villas, and a volcano as we go to the island of Montserrat in the Caribbean. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Montserrat. I'd like to welcome to the show Dan Dekker from Lexington, Kentucky, who's come to talk to us about the island of Montserrat. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here. I've listened to many episodes.
Excellent. Me too. When we talk about the island of Montserrat, where are we talking about, first of all?
Yeah, that's the big question I get, too, whenever I tell people I've been to Montserrat. They say, where is that? So we are in the Caribbean. There is the Lesser Antilles island chain that kind of arcs down toward South America. And Montserrat is in the middle. It is west of Antigua and south of St. Kitts. So if you know where those are in the middle of that chain there, that's where Montserrat sits.
Excellent. Well, why should someone go to Montserrat?
We found Montserrat. Actually, it's a funny story how we found it. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Jason Bourne movies.
Sure.
That came out with Matt Damon. They're based on a book series.
I had read the books long before the movies came out, yeah.
Okay. So, as you may be familiar, probably nobody else is, in the third book, he has to hide his family from another assassin, and he hides them in a fictitious resort on the island of Montserrat.
I did not remember that.
And so that's how we first heard of it, was we looked it up, said, what is Montserrat? Where is it? And of course, the most famous thing on Montserrat is its volcano, which is also right now the most interesting thing or unique thing to see in Montserrat. So Montserrat, back in the 80s, all the way up to the 80s, the main city there was Plymouth. Montserrat had 12,000 people. And then in the early 90s, the Soufriere Hills volcano, which is right up the slope from Plymouth, started erupting and started having earthquakes and all that stuff. And so they had to evacuate the whole city of Plymouth. And so everyone had to move to the north side of the island. A lot of people left the island. And then over the next 5 years or so, the volcano just started erupting and spewing ash, and the rain would wash the ash down into the city, and the whole city of Plymouth got covered up. So their main city is pretty much gone now, but it is something you can go do in Montserrat.
And I can practically hear some people saying, didn't you guys talk about this recently on Amateur Traveler? And the answer is, yes, we did talk about a day trip to Montserrat. And so when Dan pitched me this idea, I said, well, what else is there to do? Is there enough to do? Because we have just talked about it. And he convinced me there is. So what are we going to do when we're on Montserrat?
Sure. So I think your previous guest took a helicopter tour over Plymouth. But what you can do right now, and this is actually a newer thing you can do, you can go in and walk around and visit the city of Plymouth. The British government, which controls Montserrat, it's an overseas territory, is very cautious about everything. And so for actually our first couple trips to Montserrat, you couldn't go to Plymouth. It was just off limits, the exclusion zone. But now you can go visit. So there are tour guides who are certified to lead tours of Plymouth. You have to make reservations, and there's a lot of rules around there. There's like a police escort practically. But they will take you in to the city of Plymouth. You can drive in, you get out of your car, you can walk around, see all the whole city, really. The whole city is almost buried 2 floors deep in lava and ash now. Depending on where you go, you can see there's a grocery store that the whole main level is just covered. You can't see anything, but then the upstairs office, you can still see desks with stuff on it and papers and all that stuff just sitting there from when they had to evacuate. There's hotels you can get glimpses in. It's crazy because you walk right up to it, but you're walking up to the 3rd floor of the hotel, stuff like that.
When you say you're walking on lava and ash, obviously it is lava that is cooled for sure. But how much ash are you? Is it like walking on a few inches of ash on top of lava, or is it ash drifts? Or
Sure, yeah. It's more just like dirt at this point. It gets rained on, so it's not like inches of ash that you're pushing out of the way with your feet or anything. Okay. You wouldn't wear your nice shoes when you'd go there, but you can see it. But one reason you're required to have a guide is there's lots of one-story buildings that are just completely covered. And so if you don't know where you're going, you'll just walk on top of a one-story building that currently has 12 feet of ash sitting on top of its roof, just waiting for something to make it cave in and fall.
That seems like something we ought to avoid. Okay.
Yeah, so good reason to have a guide. And of course, the wonderful thing is these guides are so knowledgeable because they used to live in Plymouth. And our guide brought pictures, and he had pictures of this is what it looked like in the early 90s. And obviously, here we are today, just completely gone, buried. If it's not buried, it was probably burned or caught fire at some point. So it's a very unique thing to see, to walk around. They call it a modern Pompeii. Walk around a whole city that's just been overrun by a volcano.
Now, you mentioned that your first couple trips to Montserrat, you couldn't do this. How many trips to Montserrat have you done, and what keeps bringing you back here?
We've gone 3 times. We did 2 trips in the winter several years ago, and then we always wanted to do a longer trip, and we have kids, so we went this summer, or last summer, for 2 weeks and stayed 2 weeks in the summertime, which is definitely their off season. But why we keep going back, it's just such a quiet, relaxing place. I try to think of a good way to sum up Montserrat, and my favorite way is to say, if a cruise ship is your perfect dream vacation, then Montserrat is not for you. If you want to be around 3,000 other tourists and have a giant corporation prepare your meals every night, that is not Montserrat. Montserrat is for someone who's more inventive, doesn't mind doing some legwork themselves in terms of planning and getting around and renting a car and all that stuff. But what you're rewarded is an island with only 5,000 people that has very few tourists because it's hard to get there. And so you have so many places to yourself. Everyone talks about you can have the beach to yourself, but in Montserrat, that's really true. It is very rare to have anybody else on the beach with you when you're there. You
mentioned getting there is difficult. Tips for getting there?
Yeah. Montserrat, I had one runway, or one airport, I should say, and it got covered with lava, so they had to build a new one. And being a volcanic mountainous island, there's not a lot of flat spots. So they do have an airport, but the runway is only 1,800 feet long. So the only thing that gets into Montserrat is very small planes. Almost every tourist comes in through Antigua. So you fly any major airline to Antigua, obviously from Europe, America, they all fly there. And then you have 2 options to get to Montserrat. You can take a ferry that Montserrat runs, or you can fly in a little puddle jumper 8-seat plane. And I can tell you from experience, you want to take the plane.
Okay.
Our first trip, we pinched some pennies and saved a little money and said, sure, we'll take the ferry. The situation with Montserrat is everything is small, right? So the ferry is always small. It's usually subsidized by the government because there isn't enough people. So you never know what boat you're going to get. So our first trip there, took the ferry there. It takes about an hour and a half from Antigua. It was okay, a little rough, but we got there. But when we left to go home, we left Montserrat going to Antigua, and I guess you're going against the current, and the waves had picked up. And so that was a 2.5-hour ferry ride. And every person who wasn't a professional sailor threw up on that boat.
Okay.
It was not a good way to end a relaxing vacation. Since then, we've paid a little extra and taken the 20-minute flight over to Montserrat, which I really enjoy. My wife is not a big fan of those little planes. If you've ever been in them, they're a lot smaller than you even think they are.
And they move around a lot more than the big planes do. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's not a lot between you and the outside.
True.
So you fly into Antigua. Fly Montserrat is the company. And there's a couple other ones, but that's the main one. And you book a quick flight. Takes about 25 minutes from Antigua over to Montserrat. It's the only flight you'll take where you see where you're going and where you're starting, the whole time, both directions.
And what kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us once we're in Montserrat?
Sure. Obviously, the volcano that we talked about is probably the number one thing to do right now. You can do it right now, and then obviously if the volcano started acting up, you couldn't do it again. So if you go and it's an option, definitely take that option. Piggybacking off the volcano is the Montserrat Volcano Observatory. It's in a hillside, a safe distance away from the volcano. So you can go anytime to see that. They have a little museum there. They have all sorts of cool artifacts that have come out of Plymouth or areas affected by the volcano that you can see, just amazing metal things that just got completely melted and crumpled. They have a video you can watch while you're there and some just general educational displays. It also has a great view of the volcano itself. You can stand up on the ledge there and see the volcano. It's often covered in clouds, but If you luck out, you get to see the actual thing. So that's a great partial morning activity to drive up there and see that. My only negative thing I'll say about Montserrat is I think the assistants who work at the Volcano Observatory are mainly hired for science reasons and not to deal with the general public.
Sure.
So I swear every time I've been there, they just seem annoyed that like a tourist has showed up and they have to stop their regular job to do the touristy stuff. But it's one thing they can improve on, Volcano Observatory.
They may have also wanted to go to an island without tourists. So,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
To be fair.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the two main volcano-related activities. Other things to do, Montserrat has wonderful beaches, of course. I'll suggest some for you. Our favorite beach on the whole island is called Woodlands Beach. It's right in the middle of the island. It's definitely in the areas more where tourists stay, the villas where visitors stay. And it's a black sand beach. It's super quiet. It's either you have it to yourself or maybe one other family will show up and you're sharing a good 100 yards of beach, just you and them. It has great snorkeling if you're into snorkeling. In the winter, the water can be a little rough. It just depends on what the conditions are when you get there, but we got to do a lot of snorkeling this summer. My kids ended up being great at that, so you can walk right off the beach and in, go right out and see lots of fish, lots of different coral, and do that. So that's one good beach. There is another half-day activity that would be really good is called Rendezvous Beach. It's on the very north end of the island, and it is the only white sand beach on Montserrat. And the neat thing about Rendezvous Beach is it's only accessible via hiking, or obviously you can take a boat to it because it's a beach. What we did the first 2 trips we were there is we did the hiking route. So you drive up, there's a parking area on the north end of the island. It's weirdly in like a construction zone, but you park there and then you have to hike over a hill and get down to the beach, and then you have an entire white sand beach to yourself. It says the hike takes an hour. We always did it in 30 to 45 minutes, so just depending on what shape you're in, it'll take 30 minutes to an hour to do the hike. And it's over a hill, so once you get to the top, it's just a downhill stretch down to the beach. But that's a beautiful white sand beach. Again, snorkeling they have at almost every beach, I think, in Montserrat. So as long as the water's flat enough, you can just walk off the beach with your fins and goggles and go right out in the water. I should say Woodlands Beach and some of the other ones do have facilities at them, like bathrooms. Montserrat, it's small, so there's not like shops or anybody selling food or anything like that. But there are places to wash off and bathrooms you can use, except for Rendezvous Beach, because you're hiking to the middle of nowhere and there's nothing out there. So if you go out there, bring your own water and snack and sunscreen, of course, because you're out there alone on the hike.
Got it. If you've been to amateurtraveler.com, then you know photos are important to me. Not just travel photos, but all my photos. The hundreds of photos that I take on a trip. It's the one thing I bring home from my trip. I don't collect spoons, I collect photos. But what to do with all those photos can be a bit of a challenge. And then if you combine that my wife is also taking pictures, and maybe we've got pictures from my kids as well, then I need a solution like Mylio Photos, who are sponsoring this episode. Mylio Photos is a smart system for managing a lifetime of photos from multiple devices and multiple people. My old photo albums are near the door so that I could grab them in an emergency. Don't my digital photos deserve the same kind of attention? Mylio Photos lets me find, search, remove duplicates, but also remove some of the worry of losing those photos. If you want to try Mylio Photos, because you're a listener of Amateur Traveler, you can get 25% off your first year of Mylio Photos when you sign up for an annual plan by going to mylio.com/traveler. That's mylio.com/traveler. Get 25% off your first year at mylio.com/traveler. And thanks to Mylio for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. And it looks to me like the beaches are all on the the east side of the island?
It's west, actually, yeah.
The west side, okay.
Yeah, all sunsets, which we love. Yeah, the whole bottom half of the island is an exclusion zone, so you can't really go down there. But then, yeah, the inhabited part of the north half is almost exclusively on the west side of the island.
Okay.
There is some stuff on the east side. It's a little drier over there, so there isn't much over there. I guess when we're talking about the east side of the island, the one thing you can do is called Jack Boy Hill. It's an overlook, so if you have a rental car and drive all the way around the north side of the island, and get to the east side, there is an overlook that looks down on the old airport. So you go there, they have the binocular things you can look through, and you can look down and see, at least you used to be able to see the old tower, air traffic control tower, and you could see part of the runway. I think the whole runway is covered up even now, but you can see where the airport used to be. And Jack Boy Hill is a start of a really good hiking trail too. So we've done that hiking trail leading from there, goes up Jack Boy Hill appropriately. That's a good half-day activity because you can go, you can do the lookout, see the old airport, and then it's part of a larger trail system, but it's about 90 minutes up to Jack Boy Hill, and then obviously a little quicker coming back down.
Got it. And you're pretty close then to the exclusion zone, I would think.
Yeah, you're coming down the east side right about to the border there. So the airport's in the exclusion zone. You couldn't get to the old airport, but you would get a view of it from Jack Boy Hill, the viewing area.
Okay.
Another good activity you can do, because it's a mountainous island, there is lots of good hiking, a volcanic island, I should say. They have a lot of hiking because it's very rugged terrain. And most of the west side where everybody's staying is more forest. I don't know if I'd call it a rainforest, but definitely a heavily forested area. So they have some really good hiking trails that lead all the way through there. Like I said, from the east side, you can do the Jack Boy Hill hiking trail. They have trails of all different levels. One unique thing that I have not seen yet is they found some petroglyphs that were on the rock, or pictures drawn on the rocks. Mm-hmm. And they just discovered them in 2016. Some hikers were out forging new trails and found them. So if you're an avid hiker, you'd need a guide to do it. But you could it's like a 2.5-hour round trip hike, and you can see these 1,000-year-old drawings written on the rock there that were just found 5-10 years ago. So
they're thought to be from Carib Indians? Or
Amera Indians as well.
Amera, okay.
Yeah, is said. They think it's from that age. Around 1,000 years ago was the guess. So if you look up hiking in Montserrat, you're going to find the name Scriber, who is a famous hiking guide. I think he knows every trail. He's known for being able to call birds. Montserrat has a famous bird called the Montserrat oriole, which only lives on Montserrat, and he can call it and try to bring him in for you. I've heard the bird. I have not seen it yet. But he is available to lead hikes, so if you wanted to go do some of these more complicated inland hikes, the petroglyphs, for example, he would be someone you'd want to hire to go on a hike and do it. The hike was a little bit too much for my kids. I really wanted to go this last time, but that was going to be too much for them, so I sadly have not seen the petroglyphs yet. But
got it. Okay.
Another interesting historical thing you can do in Montserrat is, because Montserrat is a British overseas territory, they have a lot of famous Brits coming and going. And one of the most famous to regularly be there was George Martin. Do you know who George Martin is at all?
Of the George Martin guitars?
Ooh, no, I don't know. He
or
also
George R.R. Martin, the author, or George. There's a few.
This is George Martin, music producer for the Beatles.
Got it. Okay, that George Martin. Okay.
He, at some point, I think in the 70s, went to Montserrat and totally fell in love with it. Back in London, he ran Air Studios. And so he created a second location called Air Studios Montserrat. And I basically took an old house there, a villa, and converted it into a music studio. And I think it was post-Beatles era, technically, but lots of famous artists came and went while George Martin was there. So Elton John was there. There's a whole list of like early 80s albums that were recorded with Air Studios in Montserrat. It got abandoned. I think it was after one of the hurricanes. It got damaged, and he just moved everything back to London. But the building is still there, and so you can actually drive up to it. It's just sitting there open as a house you can go visit. You can pull up. There's a sign giving like a brief history of it, and you can walk up the steps and peek your head in and see some definitely late 70s, early 80s decor, and even a couple pieces of sound equipment that were probably too heavy to fly off the island. And so it's still there for you to check out. Paul McCartney was there. I don't know. I think it was post-Beatles, but he was there and stayed on Montserrat for a summer and did some music recording too, I think.
When you say peek in the windows, it's pretty much a ruin at this point.
Yeah, it's an abandoned house in the Caribbean, so it's not it's not great, but it's
doesn't
there.
take very long, yeah.
Yeah, nature reclaims things quickly when it's hot and wet.
Right.
But yeah, you can see the old Air Studios there.
What else are we going to do in Montserrat?
We haven't talked about dining yet, and obviously on vacation, part of the fun is eating out. If you tag on to George Martin and Air Studios, George Martin purchased a bed and breakfast called Ulveston House. It's kind of buried in a neighborhood where a lot of expats and snowbirds live, but it's a beautiful bed and breakfast, and the Ulveston House restaurant is one of the nicest restaurants on Montserrat. I highly recommend it being one of your stops if you go there. We had a lunch there the other day. The governor of Montserrat happened to sit right next to us. Our kids were quite impressed that we were dining with the governor of Montserrat.
I would think that people of Montserrat might be a little sensitive to the phrase buried in a neighborhood that you just used, though.
I'm sorry, yeah. It is a very lovely location. Yeah. It's actually really neat because you get to eat out on, every time I've eaten there, they eat on the patio, of course, or the front deck of the house, I guess you would say. Yeah, we were cracking up that I forget her name, but it's the current governor of Montserrat, 5,000 people, where the mayor of our city is mayor of 300,000 people. But
sure,
she still gets the title of governor, so it sounds pretty impressive. We had the most fantastic, I want to call it a cheesecake, but it was like lighter and fluffier than a cheesecake last time we were there. And I guess the chef at Ulveston House is known for her desserts, so don't miss out on the desserts if you go there.
Okay.
Our favorite lunch place is called The Attic. I was going to say it's in the neighborhood again, but I'll try to say that. It is a beautiful it's breakfast and lunch. I've actually never done the breakfast, but they have quite a little lunch business going there. We've always eaten in, but they have a lot of people, especially business people from Montserrat, coming and getting to-go orders there. They do some sandwiches, but they do rotis, which is like an Indian rolled thing. It's not a tortilla, but it's like a tortilla.
Sure.
But with like slowly stewed meats and stuff put inside a tortilla. And they were fantastic and a really good deal too. So it's a really affordable, delicious lunch to get. On Montserrat, I don't know if other Caribbean islands do this. Everyone gets obsessed with what they call local juices. So they're not drinking a whole lot of soda there. Everyone kept using that phrase, and I felt awkward using it until I saw a local actually come in, and the first question she had was, "What local juices do you have?" So they're taking all the different local fruits and turning them into just fresh juices you can get. So I think we had mango one time. If you're there in the winter, they do a tamarind one where they take like the seeds from tamarind, and it is like the most delicious thing. I never found a replacement for it here in the States. There's things that are tamarind flavored, but it's obviously making it with real tamarind is very unique. They also do ginger beer, which has gotten popular in the U.S. for mixing in drinks, but again, this isn't like a soda-based product. This is someone digging up ginger roots, doing something with them, and actually fermenting them in a drink. It makes a very delicious, but really like spicy almost drink you can have. It's like hard to describe. It definitely catches you off guard, but really tasty. And so the Attic, whenever we were there, always had lots of local juices you could try.
Now, where do you end up staying in Montserrat? You mentioned Airbnb, but didn't sound like that's where you were staying.
No. Again, Montserrat is small is the answer to lots of things. There is 2 hotels on the island. There is the Tropical Mansion Suites, which is on the north end. It's near the airport. I've never stayed there. I get the feeling it's more business people coming through, people only staying for a few days that stay there. I think they have like 17 rooms or something. That's the only main hotel.
That's the big hotel.
Yeah, 17 rooms is the big hotel. That's Montserrat. There is the Viewpoint Hotel, which is on the very southern edge of the habited part of Montserrat. I actually used to be on a cliff over the ocean, but now the volcano has pushed out the land farther right below them, so they're like no longer oceanfront, which is funny. Still see the ocean, but like down from their cliff is just more land now. They have all these cute little huts, so everyone gets a room, but each room is kind of separate out in the grass. And Viewpoint, I know it shut down for a while, then opened again, and I think it's currently open as we're recording. It used to be the place to go, I think, in the heyday of Montserrat was the Viewpoint Hotel. But what most people do is rent villas. So there's lots of houses to rent. Because you're on a hillside, pretty much every villa has an ocean view. And the big benefit, and one reason we like going to Montserrat, is these villas are just so cheap. If you've stayed in Florida recently, especially post-COVID or gone to Hawaii. I mean, you want something on the ocean or with an ocean view, it's going to cost you a fortune. But this past summer, we rented a house. We got a 4-bedroom house. It had a pool. It was literally on the ocean. I had steps down that went into rocks, into the water. And it was $2,100 a week. In Florida, that would cost you $10,000 a week to be beachfront or something. Like even 2 houses from the beach would probably cost you $10,000 back in America. But just again, because there's not a whole lot of demand for these things, all these villas are very affordable. That was actually considered an upper end villa, was $2,500 a week, but you can easily spend less than $2,000 a week and get a house with a pool, with an ocean view, all to yourself for a week.
And are you getting those through VRBO or Airbnb or a local site, or how are you doing your searching?
Yeah, there are some on Airbnb. The prices seem to be higher than what you can get renting locally. We've used a company called Tradewinds Montserrat. It's tradewindsmontserrat.com. You can go there and browse all the houses. I think montserratvillas.com is another one I've talked to but never rented through. They existed before Airbnb came in, so they still seem to have the majority of homes and villas for rent on their sites. And I really like it because, like lots of these countries, like what's on the site isn't necessarily up to date. So I usually just email them and be like, hey, I'm bringing my family. I have 3 kids. We want a pool and this. And they'll give you just a list of what's available and the rates and all that stuff. And you have a little personalized conversation and end up with a great place to stay. So, yeah, most people I know that go there end up renting a villa. You get a whole house, but it's such a deal compared to America.
Got it.
And then along with a house rental comes a rental car. The tourism board will tell you there's taxis readily available, but I don't know how accurate that is. And it's definitely a driving type of island. You're either going up or downhill everywhere. And because Plymouth is gone, that was the walkable downtown. And so now everything is more spread out. So you really need a rental car. Whoever you rent your house from can probably help you get a rental car. We just asked the people at Tradewinds, and they arranged one for us, and it was just waiting for us at our villa when we got there. And it always cracks me up because, again, it's Montserrat. So some guy just hands me the keys, and I use it all week, and then I pay him in cash at the end of the vacation. And that's all no paperwork. Just, what are you going to do? Wherever you're going to go, he can find you.
Funny. This episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by MikeandLauraTravel.com. Mike and Laura, behind that website, got on my radar at least a year ago by now, because although they started travel blogging in 2015 and I started in 2005, I think they may be better at it than I am. At least they're more successful financially. And they're teaching a course on how to improve your travel blog, 3 secrets to exponentially grow your travel blog. In the training, they're going to cover how to drive thousands of readers to your blog each day on autopilot, 100% without social media, how to convert your travel blog traffic into consistent and predictable passive income, and how to take your travel blog to 6 figures and beyond. This is stuff that I need to learn. They're the hosts of the Travel Blogging Summit and the Travel Blogging School in-person retreats. They started their blog in 2015 and struggled to make consistent income for years, and then in 2019 they discovered SEO and figured out they didn't need to spend all their time on social media. If you're interested in learning more about how to be a travel blogger, go to mikeandlauratravel.com/travel-blog. That's mikeandlauratravel.com/travel-blog. And tell them Amateur Traveler sent you. Other things we want to recommend for people to do while they're in Montserrat, or are we winding down here?
Yeah, we talked about hiking, different beach options. I will say one of my kids' favorite places to go, and frankly ours as well, one final beach option, the very southern edge of the inhabited area, is called, it's 2 beaches in one. The north end was Old Road, something called Old Road runs down to what is now a new beach formed by new Volcano land. So that's Old Road Bay Beach. And then on the southern edge of that same beach is called Isles Bay is the neighborhood. So it's Isles Bay Beach. And on that beach is a wonderful beach bar. It was a place we ended up eating at the most when we were there the last time. It's called Isles Bay Beach Bar. It's run by a very friendly British couple. And we were there in the off season, so they were only open on the weekends. I think they have a little more availability in the summer, but fish and chips was a popular option in our family. They do fresh pizzas there is also what they're known for. It's literally on the beach. My brother had went with us on a previous trip, and when I told him we were going to the Isles Bay Beach Bar, his first joking comment he makes is, "That place is still there?" And he doesn't mean it hasn't gone on to business. He means like literally the ocean has not taken this beach bar and just washed it away. So yeah, I can't beat a restaurant where you're sitting on a patio, you order your food, and the kids go run and dip their feet in the sand and play in the water, and then you just yell at them to come back when their pizza's ready. So we made regular, pretty much every weekend we were there, we would go down there. They do some live music and stuff like that on the weekends as well. But yeah, the Isles Bay Beach Bar was one of our kids' favorites. I will say, speaking of restaurants, just in terms of tips, Montserrat uses the East Caribbean dollar, which is pegged to the U.S. dollar, 2.7 to 1 for some reason. But we found American dollars are accepted pretty much anywhere on Montserrat. And credit cards are hit and miss. Like every grocery store, you can use a credit card. Some restaurants you can, some you can't. The Isles Bay Beach Bar, you cannot use a credit card. Olveston House is a bed and breakfast, so they, of course, are used to taking credit card payment. You just have to plan accordingly because you will need some cash for some of the places you go.
Got it.
But yeah, that's Montserrat. It's not a huge island. It doesn't have the most things to do, but what you're going for is the tranquility and going somewhere no one else goes.
Excellent. As we get to our wrap-up questions, you're standing in the prettiest spot in Montserrat. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I would have to say it's Huron Woodlands Beach and it's sunset. Okay. The worst part of the heat is gone. I don't know about other people's kids, but sometimes my kids don't want to go to the beach, but once they're there, they just naturally find things to do. I can just sit with my wife, watch the sunset, and it's about as peaceful as life gets, in my opinion.
You say the worst part of the heat is gone. So you're in a tropical island. You're going off season, which is the time you recommend for prices more than weather, or what's the story?
Yeah, all of the Caribbean's kind of hot in the summer, right?
Yeah.
So Montserrat, this is our first summer trip, and the afternoons were like just a touch too hot. We had the pool. The pool was in serious use in the afternoons. When we went in the wintertime, we didn't use air conditioning the whole time, and we're fine and never even thought about it. You get to wake up in bare feet, you open the windows at night, have a little bit of breeze going. If you're the person who needs in the mid-60s to sleep, you'll have to find somewhere with air conditioning, which are available. But if not, the wintertime is perfect. You know, it's beach weather during the day, but cools off enough at night that you can sleep with the windows open.
Okay. And one thing that makes you laugh and say only in Montserrat.
I thought about this one because I knew you asked this question.
Sure.
So the very first time we went to Montserrat, we went to dinner the first night. It was after dark and we didn't have groceries. So we went to dinner and go to the restaurant and we're ordering at the counter. And I order a Diet Coke and she goes, "Oh, we don't have Diet Coke." I'm like, "Oh, like you guys are out?" She goes, "No, the whole island. There's no Diet Coke. The boat was late. Something happened. There's no Diet Coke anywhere. The entire island is out of Diet Coke." And that's, yeah, you get the beautiful empty beaches, but you deal with some of that stuff too. So.
Sure. The logistics of living in a small island.
Yep.
Interesting. And if you had to summarize Montserrat in just 3 words, Mr.
I asked
Dekker.
my wife this question and without hesitation. She said peaceful was her first word.
Okay.
And I think I agree with her. Again, this is the opposite of a cruise ship. This is almost nobody. Drive around, friendly locals you can hang out with, easy place to slow down and relax, enjoy quiet beaches or empty hiking trails, all that sort of stuff. So peaceful, I think it's gorgeous. It's the type of island on the west side that rains a little bit every day. Mm-hmm. So you have beautiful tropical foliage everywhere, beautiful beaches. And then my last word was rugged. So on top of that, you still got, this is a volcanic island. If you go down to the south part, you're seeing kind of raw nature down there. And it's mountainous. When you're driving up or downhill, there's not a lot of flat spots. So peaceful, gorgeous, and rugged.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Dan Dekker. Dan, thank you so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for Montserrat.
Thank you.
A special thanks to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially and who I just have fun hanging out with once a month on our monthly Zoom call. Last month, one of the patrons called in from Place de la Concorde in Paris, which was pretty fun. And that was Caleb, who was a recent guest on the show talking about the island of Grenada. If you want to learn more about sponsoring Amateur Traveler, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I mentioned last episode that we have opened up both the Amateur Traveler trip to Japan in 2023 and then next year's trip to Morocco in 2024. Morocco filled up in 2 days. And so you really do have to be in amateurtraveler.com/trips, the private Facebook group, to learn about these trips. But we are going to, Sunland plural, I'm going to try and open up a second trip that would run back to back. I would be on the first part of that trip, but I couldn't stay for the whole thing. If you're interested, there's still going to be room for Morocco, and there is still room for Japan. So check out amateurtraveler.com/trips for more information on both trips. I heard from Mark on the recent episode we did in Wisconsin, and Mark was happy because he said, "Did I catch Chris in a historic fact error? The Harvey houses were located on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, not Kansas City Railroad," a comment on the podcast. While some reasonable people can disagree on the 7 best places to visit in Wisconsin, no one can talk about the Dells and not talk about the Ducks, DUWKS. Tourist use of surplus military vehicles was invented there. By the way, I still think that Kalahari is an unusual name for a water park. I was there 2 weeks ago for a conference, Mark. And Mark, you are right that I got the name of the railroad wrong, although I noticed in your email you said Atkinson, Topeka, and Santa Fe instead of Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. So I was not the only one. But yeah, I learned about it in Santa Fe, so the fact that I said Kansas City on the show was pretty sad. Thanks for catching that. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.